What happens when you adopt a dog? A dog who you fully expect to bring joy and light and connection to your family and to your life. Because that's why we love dogs so much, right? But only to find out that the dog you've adopted is so frightened of the world that all she can do is hide behind your sofa. Well, in this episode, in a departure from talking about separation anxiety, we're going to be talking about a dog just like that. And you might have heard of her. She's quite the Twitter star. Her name is Sophie. She's a Romanian rescue, and she lives with Rory Cellan-Jones and Diane Coyle. And I'm really excited because I'm getting to speak today to Simon Wooler. And Simon is the trainer who's been working with Rory and Diane and Sophie on building Sophie's confidence, on helping Sophie be less frightened of the world. Si is a fellow Academy for Dog Trainers trainer. He's been working with dogs for 12 years, specialising in fear and aggression. So he has a lot to say about fearful dogs. And his goal with any dog and with Sophie is to help people, help guardians and owners feel confident and in control and enjoy the training and enjoy their dogs. He's got a wonderful story to tell about Sophie. So whether you've got a dog who's frightened of the world or frightened of people or frightened of anything, I think you're absolutely going to love what Si has to say today. So tune in to find out more. Hello and welcome to the Be Right Back Separation Anxiety podcast. Hi, I'm Julie Naismith, dog trainer, author, and full-on separation anxiety geek. I've helped thousands of dogs overcome separation anxiety with my books, my online programs, my trainer certification, and my separation anxiety training app. And this podcast is all about sharing my tips and tricks to help you teach your dog how to be happy at home alone too. So, thank you so much for your time today. So we're talking about Sophie. Now, Sophie's story could be very familiar to lots of people in the UK, but for listeners around the world, can you tell us a bit about Sophie's backstory?
Yes, I can tell you the backstory of Sophie. She was found in the street in Romania as a very young pup, and she was fostered, as we understand it, by a vet whose brother took her and kept her at his farm. And she was homed with some other dogs and kept in the barn. Mm-hmm. To all intents and purposes, well looked after. We suspect that not particularly socialized in that period. So she kind of imprinted on the people that were at the house and the dogs that were resident there. But she didn't get a lot of contact, as far as we can tell, with unfamiliar people and unfamiliar dogs. And so consequently, when she arrived in the UK, she came into the house. She had to be carried into the house of Rory and Diane, and she promptly hurtled behind the sofa, and that's where she stayed for several days.
Oh, wow. So Rory and Diane, her new family in the UK.
Yes, Rory Cellan-Jones is the former technology correspondent for the BBC, and Diane Coyle is probably one of the most phenomenally intelligent people I've ever met. She's a Cambridge professor of economics and a former chair of the BBC, or at least the temporary chair of the BBC.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And all manner of other things, frankly. Author, as is Rory. So she's landed in an intelligent home.
Yeah. But they didn't know they were getting, they presumably thought they were getting this adorable dog who would just be, maybe have some settling in issues, but they weren't given any heads up that they were in for quite a challenge with her, right?
No, they weren't. But in fairness, I think, like many people would do, the benchmark was how she was in Romania. And that was, to all intents and purposes, friendly and excitable and interested and playful.
Right.
And that didn't translate to going into a very unfamiliar environment with unfamiliar people.
Oh, got
after
it.
a 3-day van ride,
So that those behaviors you're talking about, the sociability and so on, that was what she was demonstrating in that family in Romania. So there was some
to a
got
very
it.
small circle of people, you know.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
ultimately, I think that one of the the interesting thing about being involved in Sophie with Sophie is that you get an insight into what people think about dog behavior and
Mm.
what they think about how to fix issues around dog behavior. So the general kind of thing that people would normally be getting from their family and friend circle if you're working with somebody with a dog like Sophie, and the stuff that you wouldn't normally see. So you don't know that input is happening. So this has been a really insightful experience because I can see that in real time. I can see all of the good advice and suggestions that they get, and some of the less.
Because everybody's
Looking
got an
for,
opinion, haven't they, when it comes to dogs? Everybody's an expert.
yeah, they have, because everybody's got one and everybody's gone through an experience of some sort with them, and that informs how they see others.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sophie, like you just described, she spends 3 days in a van and transport, and she arrives in the UK. Does she go straight to her new home, or is there a transition period?
Yes, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Wow.
3 a.m. in the morning was when the van landed, and that's when Rory went out and got her. But he literally had to carry her into the house.
Right.
And I think, in fairness, she had a brief sojourn into the garden, hid under the patio table, and then headed straight back in and behind the sofa.
Wow. And so what did they make of that, of her doing that? What did Rory and Diane?
Oh, well, I think they were bemused,
Mm,
like a lot of people would be,
mm,
and a little bit lost as to
yes.
how to confront it. I think one of the things that, you see, what I did was, it's all Nina, my partner's fault, because she was looking at the Twitter feed, and Rory and Diane had a dog that they loved very much called Cabbage, who Rory used to tweet about a lot, and she died a year ago, roughly a year ago. And so they got Sophie with a mind that she would help Rory, because he is a very open sufferer of Parkinson's disease. So he does a lot of work in that regard, but it's important for him to get exercise and all of that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So Sophie was his idea of a reason to get out and do some exercise. And now this poor little dog was behind the sofa. And Nina commented to me that she thought there was a curiously wide range of suggestions coming from people that might be quite confusing.
And this is on
And
Twitter, is it? So
on
people are
Twitter,
diving into
yeah,
Twitter, fixing.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and so I contacted Rory and Diane and said, I gave them my credentials and I said, if you need any advice, get in touch. And I'm more than happy to have a chat, which they did about
Mhm.
3.5 nanoseconds later. Um, and from there on, I've been down there once, didn't see a lot of her because that was pretty early days. So I wasn't really expecting to. But we've communicated over Zoom, we've communicated over WhatsApp and Messenger and any kind of platform that works for us under the circumstances. And you know what? Actually, I'm probably preempting a question here from you, because you will know, as a separation anxiety expert, that actually platforms like Zoom and WhatsApp and the like are incredibly useful in the work that we do with dogs, with particularly dogs that have fear or anxiety related issues, because the level of contact that we can have with people is huge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the inter-session contacts that we can have. And I find that people use it. If it's there and available and you just do a little nudge, they'll ask you a question or they'll tell you about something that's happened in their day or their week
Yeah.
with their dog that they don't understand, and you can address it
Yeah.
straight away,
Yeah.
instead of those things building up between sessions, and then you've got only a limited time to deal with them. So that's been an invaluable way of working.
I love it. I love it. And also, we're not then adding to the stress. We're not an additional stressor. We're not there. We're not adding to the stress that a dog who isn't comfortable with strangers.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that then. So what were the biggest challenges that adorable little Sophie was facing? Well, you talked about the hiding, just not being comfortable around the new family. What else was going on?
Well, I think in essence,
that's pretty major anyway. But
yeah, I mean, I would have to say, I think in essence, that's it.
Yeah,
right. That's the big sale item.
Yeah,
is that everything is stressing her out.
Right.
Everything at this point, everything is scaring her, right? And the difficulty is that because we're human, we all want that to resolve quite quickly
Yes.
because, we want the story that we had in our heads to come true. And, I do that all the time. I'm human. I do that with stuff. I even do that with dogs. There've been times when I've been sitting there willing Sophie to come out, just sitting at home willing it. But you know that it takes as long as it takes with fear cases. And what you're doing is a lot of the time is that you're just trying to help the people maintain a degree of calm about the process and reassure them that it is going the way it's supposed to, because there feels like not much is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually there is.
Yeah. And, some dogs come in from a rescue situation and they're not like Sophie at all. They may have other issues. They may have no issues, but they're not necessarily, it's not uncommon for dogs to react the way Sophie did. And so can you describe what that looks like? Because if you've never had a dog who was like Sophie is, if you never had a dog shut down quite like Sophie did, you probably don't know what that looks like.
Yes, it looks like a dog that doesn't emerge very often, finds a safe place where they feel confident that they are secure, and then they don't actually emerge very much.
Right.
So, and that's the challenge. And in many ways, and when they do, they're extremely cautious.
Right.
So there's a tendency for them to scan a lot, come out very slowly, reverse very rapidly, and it's a very slow process to get them out. And that's one of the really big lessons, that one of the big messages that I would give people that find themselves with dogs like Sophie is take it at their pace.
Yeah.
Any effort to coax them out or persuade them out or change anything in the environment in order to try and accelerate that process is only actually going to make the thing go slower.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about seeing what people are suggesting, there's a tendency to think of it because it's going slowly, to think of it in terms of not working.
Yeah.
And so what you see is very well-meaning suggestions on what you could do instead. So have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried the other? Okay. And that's working on a premise that there's a problem with the process that's taking place now. But in fact, there isn't. It's doing what it's meant to do. It's working.
Yeah.
There is no need to change it.
I so agree with you. And listeners who are used to tuning in to hear about separation anxiety will totally understand that, because many of them are working through desensitization and gradual exposure. It's a slow process. A lot of change happens without us even spotting it. And meanwhile, everybody in their life is saying, well, that's not working. That's not working. So why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? So I think it's comforting for people to know it doesn't just happen with dogs with separation anxiety. It happens with a lot of these behaviors. I just wanted to ask you about the Hidey holes as well, because they can all find different spaces. So I've heard of dogs hiding under beds or picking a particular room. Did she have a spot that she was really entrenched in?
Oh yeah, she stuck to one sofa, behind one sofa.
Behind the sofa.
Behind it, yeah.
Oh.
she only changed that when there was an event, an accident, a plate fell off the arm of the sofa,
Oh,
and she shut out and she picked another place for a short period of time, for a couple of days. She picked another place,
oh,
but she went back.
yeah,
She went back, and I think that is a learning moment for people dealing with any kind of anxious dog, which is that they do choose. And actually, this whole thing is about choices. This
yes,
whole thing is about giving dogs choices about what they do and when they do it. And, it's easy to imagine that she would be more comfortable in a crate or in a bed, but she hasn't decided that. She's chosen something other than that. I mean, we decided that crates are for dogs, but,
yep,
unless the dog accepts it, then that's a bit academic.
yeah,
And so the golden rule for me, well, there are two golden rules, I think, which is one, give the dog choice and respect that choice. So everything you do is about looking to see whether they choose freely to do something or
hmm,
not. And when they do, make sure that you make positive associations
yes,
with you and their environment and something that they already like.
yeah,
But don't try and get them to move any further than they do. And I think that's really hard. People, when a dog starts to emerge and starts looking a little braver, to coin a phrase. I mean, brave is
mm,
funny. Rory and Diane raised an eyebrow when I said this to them, until I explained why. I said, I don't want Sophie to be brave. I want her to be fine.
yes, yes. I agree. I agree. And
Because a lot of people are saying how brave she's being, and
yeah,
I understand using the language sort of
mm,
at home, oh, my brave girl, and
yeah,
all that. I get that. We all do that. But actually, what you want in desensitization and counter conditioning protocols is for the dog to be fine
yeah,
before you move on,
yes.
not
I
having to
totally
be
agree.
brave, not having to step just a little bit too far,
Yeah,
but be
not having to white
absolutely fine.
knuckle it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so what that looks like is she steps out and she stops, and that's where you feed her.
Yeah.
That's where
Okay.
you make the association. You don't try and get her to take one more step by throwing the
By
food
nearing
short,
it.
or by, and lo and behold, as she gets less fearful of the environment and of you, she gets closer, and then she'll get closer. And that's where, because what we had to do with Sophie was we had to do it in kind of the reverse to the way that you would ordinarily do a stranger danger protocol with a dog. Not, I mean, you would normally be able to have a familiar human there that the dog had a safe association with, and then you would introduce the stranger, and the stranger would gradually get closer.
So I'm
It,
just going to stop you there, Side, because I just want to unpack that a little bit, because a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
of people won't be familiar with that. So, but they will be familiar with separation anxiety training, which is we always start with the easiest possible setup, whatever that looks like, and then we gradually increase the intensity as long as
that's
the
right.
dog's okay, and as long as the dog's not telling us they're not comfortable. And by the way, I love the thing about choice, because I'm often getting people say, well, the dog was barking and I was told not to come in because that's the worst thing you can do. Well, no, if your dog is telling you that they are so uncomfortable they have to bark to get you to come back in, because you need to give the dog control in this process. So I
Yes.
love the choice thing. But yeah, you're right. So we start with easy and we gradually increase the intensity. And as you're saying, normally with a dog who's fearful around people, they usually have people that they're okay with. Usually the family is the
Yeah.
familiar people that you start with, but not with Sophie, right?
Right. And that's going to be true for anybody who takes on a rescue, isn't it?
Yes.
Who's but that's
Yes.
that's that's nervous about the situation that they find
Good point.
themselves in. And so now you've got to recognize and respect the safe space, and treat and look for the signals from her
Yeah.
about where her boundaries are, where her threshold is, where she feels safe.
Yes.
And that's the place where you start to engage her with something that she really likes.
Yeah.
And in Sophie's case, it's cheese and bacon, you know.
And you
And if
are
it's
using food. So, we don't use it for separation anxiety training, but,
no, true,
as
true,
I often,
yeah,
as I say to people all the time, I'm a massive fan of using food for changing emotions. I mean, I've got one of those dogs that you and I were talking about that, just isn't comfortable with anything. And I'm never without amazing stuff with him. And so you and I, our response when a dog isn't happy with something is, okay, let's help it feel better with food, not coerce it into a behavior, but let's change that association from I don't like this to, oh, actually, this predicts something quite good. So can you just tell us about that process of linking a previously scary thing with something that's amazing?
Yes. I mean, what you do is essentially you pair something they already think is good, and usually it's something intrinsic. I mean, you can absolutely use something that they've been conditioned to feel good about,
But
but
cheese and bacon is
essentially,
a good starter.
yeah, food is the easiest thing
Yeah.
because it's the most potent thing and the thing that they usually adopt. Every dog has its price, right? Every dog has his or her price, and so we probably don't want to get into the thing about my dog's not motivated by food because every dog is, right? But anyway, so essentially what you do is it's Pavlovian. It's a Pavlovian response you're looking for. And in case anybody's not aware of the story of Pavlov's dogs, 19th century Russian scientist chappie with a big beard who lined dogs up in cages, and they would ring a bell, and 2 seconds later food would be delivered to the dog, and they would repeat that over and over and over again until the point at which the dog salivated at the sound of the bell because they knew that the bell meant food, and so they were having an involuntary anticipatory response to the bell. So now you know that you've created a positive emotional response to the sound of a bell, right? By pairing it with chicken, whatever it is. And we use
and by
that
the way, in separation anxiety training, sorry, I keep bringing it to separation anxiety
no,
training.
go on.
But we have the other way around. So often keys or shoes or coats have a conditioned negative response, right? Because they say something bad is about to happen. So we see it to just to give people some context. That's what's going on, just what Simon described, but reversed with dogs who are frightened of being left. So that thing can predict something good or something bad, right?
Yeah. I mean, separation anxiety training is a really great example of how dogs can start to put sequences together, right? So
Yes.
they really learn the sequence that leads up. That's why people find it difficult to understand why a dog does something which apparently has no, out of the blue, spontaneous. There was no reason for it. There's always a reason for it. It's just that they've learned the sequence all the way back to whatever it was, yeah. But in the case of dealing with non-separation anxiety, fear-related stuff, you want to be making that Pavlovian connection. And so what you're looking for is an indication that they are anticipating that good thing.
Yes.
And then you move just a little bit further forward towards your goal, which in Sophie's case is a walk up and take some food from your hand. Right? We are there, by the way. Hurrah!
Oh.
But the point I want to make about that is, and the thing that people find quite challenging is, if you are saying every time that your dog sees a strange person, you're going to give them chicken, you must do it. It doesn't matter what the dog does.
Yes.
So even if the dog goes off like a banshee, hooling around at the stranger, you get out of dodge. So you get the dog under threshold and in a place of safety, and then you feed. And everybody goes, but you're reinforcing the bad behavior.
Yes.
Right? And I say, it's not bad behavior. It's just behavior.
Yeah.
The difference between reinforcing bad behavior and paying for the presence of a stimulus are two different things. The point about it is that I'm making lots of points, aren't I?
Oh, no, this is great.
The point about it is that the motivation for going off at the stranger is the fear.
Yeah.
It's the desire for the stranger to depart. It isn't to get the chicken, right? If it were a behavior like sit down, stay, then the motivation is I'll do this in order to get that chicken, right?
Yeah.
But this is different. This is an emotional response, and you can't reinforce emotions. You can only change them. And the evidence is in the pudding, if that's the right. Yeah.
I like that one. Yeah, we'll take that. Evidence is in the pudding, not the proof, the evidence. Yes.
Yeah, right. Because as that fear subsides with that association, the behavior gets better or gets different, right? And that can be really challenging for people because they often feel like they need to be doing something, and the dog needs to be doing something,
Yes.
and the dog needs to be doing something that isn't going off like a banshee.
Yep.
Um, and
And
so
I get
that's a
asked it
really
all the time.
difficult.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
We're
No, carry on.
you're
No, no,
both
no.
just
Go on.
so
It's a chat. You
we're
go
both
on.
just so enthusiastic. But
Yeah.
I keep thinking of things. Oh, I must remind people that that's what we say. So in separation anxiety, I always say to people, we don't care about behavior. We care about how the dog feels. So if your dog is wandering around or on a sofa or hanging out by the door because your dog knows you come back every few seconds, so it might as well wait. We don't care about the behavior. We care how your dog is, how your dog's
Yes.
about your dog's emotional state. So it's hard though, I think, for people to give up on behavior because we spend a whole lot of time with dogs trying to reinforce behavior. But with fear and anxiety, trainers like you and I, anyway, we don't care about behavior. We care how the dog feels.
Yes. The first consideration is the dog happy?
Yeah.
Right? Is the dog safe? Does the dog
Yeah.
feel safe?
Yes.
The thing about counter conditioning is that you're not looking to get a behavior. You don't know what the behavior is going to be. All you're doing is pairing the good thing with the bad thing.
Yeah.
What happens, the behavior that represents the fear disappears, but you don't know what's coming next.
Yes.
In terms of behavior, it is what it is. Right. And that could be, sure, that absolutely could be something like begging under the table for food and it drives you nuts. But you can fix that. That's easy.
Yeah.
That's easy. You can change that anytime you want. Right. And you can do it really pretty quickly. But first of all, you need to make it so that the dog wants to be under the table.
Yes.
Begging for scraps.
Yeah.
Rather than hiding behind the sofa.
A much nicer problem to have, that a dog is actually seeking you out for food than is hiding behind the sofa from you.
Yeah. It's not really a problem, is it?
No. Jumping up to give you kisses, no, compared to a dog who wants to bite your face off because he's so scared of you. Yeah, which one we take?
And of course, therein lies a rub as well, that when people suddenly realize that actually aggressive behavior is a fear response, then they start to empathize more, understand more, and be more willing to look at it in terms of changing an emotion rather than imagining that the dog is out to do something or, that this is a vindictive behavior, which it really isn't.
Because Sophie was demonstrating more of the flight or even freeze response to a threat, wasn't she? And you talked about your Rottweiler, my Labrador Tex. They are dogs, and your dog was a dog who responds to fear and a threat by trying to get that threat to go away. So it's an aggressive response, but it's still about increasing distance from the threat.
It's all about that. Yeah.
And Sophie's response to that is, I am going to make myself so small, I'm going to hide away, and then the threat won't even know I'm here. Bless her.
Yes. And the really important thing is you've got to respect that space.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That is absolute, that's hallowed ground there for a dog.
Yeah.
You can't intrude on it. You can't move it, which is, the tendency is to want to kind of make that space bigger or require her to come out of it or make it smaller so that she has to come out and reduce her options all the time. And that's absolutely not the thing that you want to be doing.
She needs more choice, doesn't she? Not less. So, so we've got cheese and bacon in the mix. Let's talk about from the outset, what things were you getting Rory and Diane to do with the cheese and the bacon? So how was that? What was the training process look like?
Yeah, I mean, it was untidy because it has to be, I think, because you're in an environment where people have to carry on living their lives.
Right.
And you can't do setups very easily, or at least you can, but you have to be opportunistic about it.
Right? A setup is just, right, I'm going to do some training now, and this is my goal. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, and you could do that if you've got a dog that has an attachment figure who makes them feel safe, who can feed them, and you can appear in and out of the space, and you can, because order of events is crucial in these things, right? So you have to make sure that what you're not trying to do, here I go, going off on a tangent. But look, there's a message I want to get across here, and it's a little bit of a tangent, right? Which is that very often when people have reactive dogs, and I know Sophie isn't, but I want to say this because it may happen with dogs who are shy, that people try to distract them from the problem. So the person sees the problem first and starts feeding the dog before the dog is aware of the problem, in order to try and distract them past, or make them feel better about when the problem actually does appear.
Yeah.
And the order of events is wrong in that, because what you're doing, you're running the risk of reversing that pairing process, right? Now the food predicts the problem.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the food?
Every time I see cheese, a scary person comes around the corner.
Scary person. So don't give me cheese.
Yeah.
Right? Don't give me cheese, because if you give me cheese, I'm out of here. Right? Whereas what you want is scary thing. Oh, that must mean cheese. Excellent. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Okay. So distraction. No, please, anybody. Don't distract your dog. Get them in a place where you've got control. By all means, if what you need to do once they've seen the problem and you need to get out dodge quickly, and the best way to do that is feed them, then fine. But you've kept the order of events right. So you're putting a little bit of emotional money in the bank, in the emotional bank account, that's the way I talk about this a lot, about putting emotional bucks in the emotional bank account. And so what it looked like with Sophie was very opportunistic, because we couldn't predict when she was going to come out. So it got to the point where there were pots of treats and food everywhere. Okay. And as soon as she appears, something lands in front of her of juicy delight, lands in front of her. And it was just a case of doing that and just rinsing and repeating all the time. So getting them into a space where they're thinking about when they've got those opportunities, when they can take those opportunities, which is every time she rocks up, essentially.
Yeah. And the predictor of the cheese was a person present. Was that what you were using as the predictor?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually tricky, because what's clearly happened with Sophie is that she started to feel better about the people before she started to feel better about the environment.
Yeah.
Right. And so consequently, you would see stress indicators a lot. And yet the behavior that you were getting seemed to contradict it. Okay. So she might approach Diane. Initially, she did it first with Diane. You might approach Diane for attention, but demonstrate some sense of being stressed.
So conflict. Right? She was in kind of, I like you, but
yeah, conflict. Absolutely. So in early stages, I would say she was definitely conflicted. And later on, it was about that she wasn't really sure about the environment. And actually, Diane wasn't a stressor. She was a stress reliever.
Right.
So it started to very much look like she was seeking out attention from Diane in order to get relief from stress about something external, something else, right? And what we were getting when we were looking at the social media threads were people getting very concerned about the stress signals that they were seeing in a 10-second video. Right, and so my message was, there's a context to this. And, there's more to this than the 10-second video that you're seeing. So it's quite important but what I really want to do is I want to inform people of that. So it's not about saying you're wrong, stop commenting on this thread. It's about having a conversation and explaining why the preconception, there's something else going on other than that,
And that makes me think of something that gets leveled at those of us who work with fearful dogs, using food, using things that the dog might like. And this makes my blood boil. But I'm going to say it, that we're coercing the dog. Now, if anybody accuses a trainer who's using an association of coercing a dog, first of all, I'd say go look up the dictionary definition of coercion. And then also, if we're working with a dog and using food to make them do something that they really don't want to do, when they are petrified, when they are scared, when they are feeling threatened, well, that's not what we're doing. And I always think Jean Donaldson thinks she would say, well, that's just lousy training. That's not the method. That's just bad training. If you can't spot a dog,
I was going to quote her too. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't spot a dog who's over threshold because you've lured it into a situation, then that's just bad training. That's not, that's not casting aspersions on the methods that we use. I'm not saying that you and I are perfect trainers, but whereas our goal is always to go at the dog's pace and make it the dog's choice. So how can it be coercion if it's the dog's choice?
Yes, because in order to be accused inverted commas of coercing the dog has to be aware that the food is present, and so they are conflicted about whether they overstep their safety boundary to get to the food or not.
Yeah.
But if you're doing the protocol correctly, the dog does the thing, or you do the thing, before the food is present, before the dog knows that the food is coming. The dog anticipates the food, sure, because something has happened that usually predicts it.
Yeah.
But you haven't said, here's the food. If you come 2 steps further forward, you can have it. That's not what you're saying. You're saying, you've come 2 steps further forward, therefore there's going to be food. Not you can have the food.
Yeah.
Not I decide whether you can have the food. You are going to get the food.
Yeah.
Because there is a reliable predictor there. And that's been done by way of classical conditioning, of Pavlovian conditioning. It's involuntary, right? So how is it can't possibly be coercive?
Only if you do it wrong. Right. Only if you do exactly.
If you do it right. Yeah. Okay. Now, the thing I would say about that is that if dog guardians or owners or whatever you refer to them as get that wrong, it's not their fault.
No.
Right? They haven't done 2 years of a degree equivalent certification program and got a qualification, and they don't understand all of the nuance of classical conditioning. So my job is to steer them towards those and pick the most important things that they are, because you're not going to teach them all of it.
Yeah.
So pick what's important. And for me, what was important and always is order of events.
Yeah.
Order of events.
And that's probably something you drummed into Rory and Diane, isn't it? Order of events.
Yes. Endlessly. Yes. Sometimes I'd wake them up with a phone call. No, I didn't. But yes, that's my big message. That was my number one, was that. And my number two would be to try and help them identify and recognize when they are trying to persuade rather than just grabbing the event as it happens.
Yeah. And so this has all been working really rather well for Sophie, hasn't it? Because I think you mentioned that maybe your first goal was that she would take food from either Diane or Rory's hand. So you got there, though. You got to that.
Got there with
milestone.
Both of them. Yes. She now does little seek and destroy missions into the into the dining room whenever they're sitting at the table, because now the table, sitting at the table means good stuff. So does breakfast, actually, interestingly enough.
Great.
I have to say, all of the photographs that I've seen of breakfast time in that household, I want breakfast there every morning. So so she now has this little ritual that she does several times a day, where she does these little circuits of the dining room and then heads under the table to get something tasty, and then Potter either goes into the garden or heads back to what is now, frankly, a place of comfort and safety, right?
Yeah.
But essentially comfort now, essentially her chosen den. Yeah. So what I tried to do, this was an interesting thing. What I tried to do is identify things that might be those positive association ingredients, if you like, right?
Yeah.
So there isn't, sometimes the food isn't going to work as much as there is another competing motivator in play that at that time is going to work better for you, right? And in Sophie's case, there was one that stood out, and this was about still making Rory the good thing in the world, right? We got Diane. Diane was rocking it, okay? And it's not Rory's fault, and we'll actually get to another myth to bust in a second if we've got time about why dogs are more fearful of men than they are
Yes.
of women, right? But we weren't there yet with Rory, and she was still really quite timid about even just stepping out when Rory was there. So what we figured was she loves the garden, absolutely loves the garden. You'll have seen it on Twitter, loves it. So what we did was we set up a system whereby that if she was out and about, Rory would stand up, go to the door, say garden, and then open the door, and she would go out of the door, right? So the aim was that she would start to learn that Rory standing up and moving towards the door and then saying garden. So garden means the door's going to open, and Rory's the one that opens the door.
Yes. So he's the deliverer of good things.
Exactly, right? So in a sense, what I'm saying is to people at home, food's your primary motivator. I mean, there's no two ways about it. You know, that's your big hitter. But there are other things in the environment. There are always other things that you might be able to use to establish those positive associations and put a little bit more emotional money in the bank. Right?
Yeah.
Just even a little bit, a little bit
Love
counts.
it.
And of course, the other thing that's important for me, one of my jobs is to point out to people how much progress they're making.
Yes, because she's made a lot of progress. I mean, she's not been there. Is it 2 months now or coming up for 3 months?
She's in week 9.
Week 9, yes, just over 2
Yeah.
months, yeah. And so she's made, I know to a lot of people it doesn't sound like she might have made a ton of progress. I think to anybody who's had a dog like Sophie or worked with a dog like Sophie, you'll understand how massive it is. I think also people who've got a dog with separation anxiety will understand how massive it is. I know there's no crystal ball, and we never say your dog will be fine in X months, X weeks. So, but I'm going to put a but in here and give you a really difficult question. Say, but what's your sense? What's your sense for Sophie's progress? Do you see a brighter future for her if Rory and Diane continue this?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, there is no absolute. There's no absolute in any dog training, but there certainly isn't any absolute in fear-related work.
Yes.
You can't categorically say that the dog is going to stop being fearful of something or some things, or to any degree. You can say you're going to get some of the way down the road. You might even get all of the way down the road, but some of the way down the road is better than none of the way down
100%.
the road. So,
yeah.
But she's going great guns, and if we can get her confidently approaching Diane and Rory, then the next step is to get her into a harness, and then the next step is to get her out onto a walk, and that we are ready to do as soon as she is right, because here's a couple of things I just want to say in terms of myth busting. Couple of things about fear that are myths, and I want to bust them. So the first is that if a fearful dog is frightened of men, they must have been abused by men in their
all the
past.
time.
Right? This is not necessarily, it could be true, but it's not necessarily true. There are a number of ways that fear can be created, for want of a better word. It's created, yeah, go on. So certainly trauma and ill treatment can be one of them, but equally they could have a genetic predisposition to anxiety, and all kinds of things can happen in the very early weeks of life with a puppy that might result in fear. Things can happen to the mum while she's pregnant that might result in a litter being fearful. But there is also lack of socialization, which as we've said, just because they imprinted on some individuals early in life, that doesn't mean to say that they're going to naturally find it easy to adjust to others. So there are all kinds of reasons why dogs might be fearful of men, particularly given that the statistical probability is that they're going to be, if they're fearful of people, they're going to be more fearful of men than women, right? All kinds of really fascinating studies, by the way. At another time, we might talk about them because they're wacky. They're really great.
Wow. Interesting.
I saw something the other day about how they're using AI, the sensors that they use for things like the Avatar film to identify how people walk. And they think that dogs might be interpreting the walk of people differently. So women walk in a way that looks as if they're going away from the dog, and men look as if they're moving faster towards them. And we know that approach is a challenging thing when it comes to fear. Now, how true that is, and whether or not they can stack that one up, I don't know, but it was an interesting read. Where were we?
Yeah, so we were talking.
Mythbust.
You had two fears.
One more. Yeah. One more, right? And then I'll shut up.
Go for it.
Why don't you throw another dog in the mix?
Okay.
Why don't you introduce her to another dog? She'll love it. That'll help her. The other dog will teach her to not be afraid of people, right? I get it.
Or teach them Home Alone confidence. Is the other one, obviously, I hear all the time.
Right. So just the same as the fact that in separation anxiety, introducing other dogs, having company from dogs doesn't fix it. The same is true of fear towards people. The other dog doesn't fix it, right? What you do get, you could make a case if the dog really, and I have done it, you could make a case for if the dog really likes other dogs, you can use the other dog as the associate. I'm trying to avoid using jargon here.
No. So the other good thing you were talking about, Rory predicting the garden or Diane predicting chicken, but the other dog could be the thing.
The other dog could be the
thing.
The cheese, right? The other dog could be the cheese. If what you do is they see the person first and then they see their pal dog, right? You could do that. It's feasible. What it doesn't do is if you just introduce the dog to play, then that's great. They have this good time and they get some stress relief and they enjoy themselves. But when you take the dog away, that hasn't advanced. It hasn't advanced your cause in terms of people. So you go back to where you were in that, and you still have to do the work. The other thing about it is that you may have a dog that doesn't like other dogs. Right? So the consequences of just introducing another dog into that environment, which they already are nervous about, with people that they are already nervous about, and now you've put something in they're scared of. Now you've got a problem, right?
You just added to
it. The thing, although it's a well-intentioned suggestion, my position is I want her absolutely rock solid safe about the people and about the environment that she's in before we introduce anything else. And then we're going to do that in a really measured and controlled way. We're going to test whether she is good with dogs or not. Because she may not be. She hasn't had a lot of contact with them. She's got the dogs that she was in the barn with, and I don't know how many that was. Not that it matters, but I don't know how many it was. And I don't know how many strange dogs, unfamiliar dogs, she was introduced to while she was there. I have no idea of that.
And those dogs in the barn are different dogs. I mean, I say that a lot to people because occasionally we do see another dog helping one. I don't know if it's helping, but we see the introduction of a dog into a household, whether that's, parent's dog comes to stay for the weekend, and the anxious dog, the dog that can't be left, seems much better. But that I always say, but that could just be that dog, and unless you want to borrow your mum's dog 7 days a week, then it's a risk to assume that another dog is going to. So on the rare occasions it seems to make a difference, it also can be very dog dependent, I
think it makes a difference while the dog's there. Right, it makes a difference while the dog's there. But when you remove the dog, you don't see them at that level, stay at that level, right? So in a sense, the same way as that if you give a dog that you're leaving who has sepangs a Kong before you leave, right? The measure of how long they are okay for starts when they finish the Kong.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
same principle.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a great story. I don't know, we could probably chat for another hour about it. But I did just want to close with, I'm going to put you on the spot here and say, if you had 2 tips, I'm going to give you 2 to give to people who think they've got a dog like Sophie, what are those 2 tips?
The first tip is go at their pace, right? Take your time, give them every opportunity to make good choices. And actually the good choice is the right one for them. So whatever that is, that's the first one. And the second one you will not be surprised by is that if you're struggling, if you're finding it difficult, if you don't understand the behavior, if it's bemusing to you, go find a really good pro to help you.
Yep. And I know that lots of people like you who really understand this topic, yes, sometimes people can't afford to hire a one-to-one trainer, but people are offering online classes now. They're offering fantastic resources online. So it's just about finding the right stuff. And by the way, if anybody in my listener group wants to know where the right stuff is, always just get in touch and we'll make sure you get the right info.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my email is easy. It's on my website, which is currently, there is a website up, but there's a new one being built. So,
well, I was going to say, we will link to a few things in the show notes, Si. So where can people follow Sophie's ongoing story? Is Twitter the best place for that?
Yeah, Twitter, I think, is the main place.
So we'll link to that.
She has an Instagram account. Well, she doesn't. Rory has.
Of course.
There's a lot of pressure on for Sophie to have her own Instagram account, and I can understand that. I'm kind of with them on that one. Yeah, so they can find her on Twitter. Hang on,
that's fine. I will.
Oh, you can find it, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can find Rory's. I think he's Ruskin147 or something like that.
I'll pop that on.
And if anybody is out there really struggling, can't find a trainer, or needs some help in finding one, then my email.
Well, I'll pop that in the show notes as well. Are you sure? We get thousands of listeners. Are you sure?
Yeah. I mean, if I get a lot, then I will go through them and I will respond. It just might take a while for me to do that. My phone number's on there. I'll be
getting 3 a.m. WhatsApps from people in Los Angeles. So
yeah, well, I love WhatsApp. It's great.
I know. What do we do without it?
What else can I? Yeah. So and I will at least point them at a list of people that.
Perfect.
What I can't sometimes do though is I can't say for sure how good anybody is. I can't recommend unless I know them personally.
Yeah. No, and I'm the same.
All I can say is they've got the right credentials.
I'm the same.
To help. So I'm more than happy to do that. Well,
what a brilliant conversation. I loved it because I love that we've talked about Sophie's journey, but we've also talked about how to help dogs overcome fear, which I think is going to be really helpful for a lot of people who have a Sophie or a dog like Sophie, or a dog who's just fearful. Yeah. And also we've managed to link it into separation anxiety, which is the separation anxiety geek in me always manages to do in most conversations.
How clever are we? And you managed to get a word in edgeways, didn't you?
Just about. But listen, thank you so much for your time today. And I think we'll all be watching to see Sophie's progress, and we are all rooting for her. So thanks so much, Si.
You're very welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Be Right Back Separation Anxiety podcast. If you want to find out more about how I can help you further, head over to julienaismith.com. Meanwhile, if you enjoyed listening today, I would love it if you would head over to wherever you listen to your podcasts and consider rating my show. Thanks so much. Good luck with that training, and bye for now.